Hello everyone, this is Ryan King. So over a year ago, I created a tutorial on how to make a photorealistic Rubik's Cube, and then I also showed you how to animate the cube. Now, I made that tutorial over a year ago, and since then I've gotten a lot better at making tutorials, and so I decided to redo the tutorial. So in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to create a photorealistic Rubik's Cube like this one here, and we're even going to be adding some surface imperfections. So if you look right here, in the reflections of the cube, you can see that there are even some fingerprint textures. We're going to be adding that in as well to make it even more photorealistic. And then I'm also going to show you how to animate the Rubik's Cube so that you can make an animation of the Rubik's Cube being solved. Before we get started, there's a few resources online that I'm going to be using to make the tutorial. So I'm going to be using this Fingerprints 002, and this is on cc0textures.com. So we're going to be using this for the fingerprints on the Rubik's Cube, and I'm just going to be downloading the 4K JPEG. So link is in the description if you'd like to download this. You don't have to, it's totally optional, but if you want an even more photorealistic Rubik's Cube, then this will really help. And then to get some really realistic lighting, I'm going to be downloading this Kaylee interior, and this is on HDRI Haven. So I'm going to be downloading the 1K version. Link is in the description if you'd like to download this HDRI to get some very realistic lighting. Now, just a few more things before we get started. If you have a real Rubik's Cube model, it'd be a great idea to go ahead and get it, and that way you can look at it while you're modeling the Rubik's Cube to make it even more realistic. And this is a classic Rubik's Cube with all the classic colors, and it's 3x3, so this is what I'm going to be creating in this tutorial. But even if you don't have a Rubik's Cube, then you can go online and look for some reference images as well. Also, I'm trying to make Blender tutorials and Blender content for a living, so if you'd like to help support what I do and also get the project files for my tutorials, then you can do that over on my Gumroad store and my Patreon page. The links are in the video description. And one last thing before we start, I wanted to thank this video's sponsor, Sketchfab. Sketchfab is an awesome 3D model site where you can preview 3D models in your browser. You can even view them in AR, VR, or on a phone or tablet. They also have a 3D model store where you can purchase models and assets. You can even apply to sell your own models on the platform. Check out Sketchfab with the links in the description. Alright, now here we are in a new scene in Blender. Now if you want to see the buttons that I'm pressing, my screencast keys are right down here in the corner, and you can see what buttons I'm pressing. So the first thing we're going to do is just double tap A to select everything, and then we'll press X and delete. We're now going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add a cube, because you can't use the default cube, you have to delete it and then add a new cube. It's just what we do. Alright, I'm going to tab into edit mode, and first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to model one of the cubes, and then we will array that over once we've created one of the cubes. Now this one cube, it's the same on both sides as well as up and down. So what I'm going to do is delete this side of the cube and also the bottom and this side, and then we can just use one corner, and then we can mirror that over so that we don't have to model as much and we can just work with one corner. So to do that, I'm going to press Ctrl R to add a loop cut, and I'm going to left click and then right click so that this loop cut gets placed back in the center of the scene. So in edit mode, I'm going to press Ctrl R, and then I'm going to hover my mouse over here till you can see the yellow line, and I'm going to left click and then right click so that it hops back to the center of the cube. I'm going to do the same thing over here, so Ctrl R, left click and right click, and then the same thing over here, Ctrl R, left click and then right click. So now what I want to do is delete everything except this little corner, and then we'll add the Mirror Modifier. So I'm first going to select this vertice and then hold down the Shift key and select all the vertices around it, so that we just have this corner of the cube selected. Now to delete everything else, I'm going to press Ctrl I, and that will invert the selection. Then I can just press X and delete vertices. So now we can tab back into object mode and go right over here to the modifiers panel. I'm going to click on add modifier, and we are going to add the mirror modifier. And now what we want to turn on is the X and the Y and the Z, and that way it's going to mirror it on all the axes, and our cube is back. And if we tab into edit mode, you can see that we just have the corner of the cube, but when we edit this side, all the other sides are going to be edited. Now if I double tap A to select everything and press G to grab, you can see that the cube isn't connected, it's just kind of sitting there. So to connect it, you can click on this clipping, and then when you press G to grab, it's going to move the whole thing. I can just press escape though, because I don't want to move it. Let's tab back into object mode now, and if you look at a Rubik's Cube, the edges are just a little bit smooth. So what I want to do is I want to add a bevel to these edges. So I'm going to click on add modifier, and I'm going to add a bevel modifier. Now the segments here, I'm going to turn this up to 4. I think that looks pretty good. And then we'll also shade this object smooth. So just go object and then click on shade smooth. Now this amount value, if you turn this up or turn it down, you can see that it's going to change the size of the bevel. So just look at your reference and remember this isn't the entire Rubik's Cube, it's just one of the cubes, and just look at your reference and try to get it as close as you can. I think I'm just going to make mine a little bit bigger, probably something like that, so just get it to whatever you like. So now I need to apply this because when I go in here and when I edit the cube, I don't want it to be adding bevels to all of my edits. So I just want the bevels to be along the sides here. So I'm going to click right here on the drop down and then click on apply. And now if we tab into edit mode, you can see that the bevel has been applied. So now what I want to do is I want to inset this face, and then we can make this the color, and then everything else is going to be black. So these faces right here, these are going to be the different colors on the side of the Rubik's Cube. Now before I add that in, I want to make this a very photorealistic Rubik's Cube. So if you look really close up, you can see that there's actually a little bit of an indent that goes in and then comes back out before there's the color. It's almost like there's a separate piece that's connected, which is the color. So what I want to do is I want to inset this and then just make a little indent right in there, and then it comes out before we have the face. So what I'll do is I'll press 3 or click right here, and that's going to go to the face select. Then I can select this face and then hold in the shift key and select this face and this face. And also real quick, before I forget, we should probably save this Blender file so that if Blender crashes, we won't lose anything. So I'm just going to go File and then click on Save As. I'm just going to save this as Rubik's Cube tutorial somewhere on my computer and just click on Save As. All right, so now I want to inset these faces and then make that little crease there in the Rubik's Cube. So to do this, I'm going to press I. So I is the shortcut key for insetting a face. Now you can see that when we inset that, it's not really being connected to the mirror. You can see right here where my mouse is, it's not really connecting. So what I want to do is I want to press B, and that's going to turn on this boundary setting. So you can see right here it says boundary off and B boundary on. So what you need to do is just press B, and you can see now it says boundary off, and now this is going to be connected to the mirror. So that is great. So what we need to do is we just need to scale this down, and again look at your reference and just scale it down to the size that you think is good, probably somewhere right there, and I'm just going to click to place that. All right, so that is great. Now what I want to do is I want to extrude those faces back in, and then we will scale it down again and then extrude them back up. So to make this easier, I'm just going to press 1 on the numpad to go to front view, and I'll press Z, move my mouse over and let go to go into wireframe. So to do this, I'm going to press Alt E. Now when you press Alt E, it's going to bring up this menu, and I want to extrude the faces along the normals. And that way, whichever way the faces are facing, that's the way that it's going to be extruded. So if you click extrude faces along normals, now you can see that it's only going to move in or out. So up and down for this one, and then back and forth for the others. So now what I want to do is just bring this down and then click to place that. Now if you want to redo this, just press Ctrl Z. An easier way to do this is to press 1 on the numpad for side view and then press Z, move your mouse over and let go to go into wireframe, and you can just zoom in, and then again just make sure those are selected and press Alt E. Click on extrude faces along normals, and then you can just bring them all down. They're all going to come into the center. So I don't want it to bring it in very far, just about that far. So I'll just click to place that, and you can see how far down this is. So you can see that's just kind of going down. Now what I want to do is inset the faces again, and then I'll extrude them back out. So just make sure they're still all selected, and I'm going to press I to inset again, and then I just want to bring it down a tiny little bit, and remember, press B if you need to. I want the boundary to be off so that they connect, and then just click to place that. So if I zoom in here, you can see it's just very, very small. That's how much we inset the face. So I'll press 1 on the numpad again for side view, Z to go into wireframe, and now I just want to extrude these back up. So again, we're going to press Alt E, click on extrude faces along normals, and then just move your mouse up. You can also hold down the shift key as you drag to make your movements more sensitive, and then just click when it's just about at the top here. If it's a little bit under, a little bit over, that's okay, just as long as it's very close. So we can go back into solid view now and tab back into object mode. And I'm actually going to just go to object and shade this flat so that you can see what I did. So you can see here, if I tab into edit mode, we just have that little crease right in there, kind of that indent, and that's going to make it more photorealistic. So I will just shade this object smooth again. And now what I want to do is I want to add a subdivision surface modifier to smooth out the Rubik's Cube. So the shortcut key is Ctrl 2. You can also click right here and click on add modifier, and then click on subdivision surface. Now you can see that there's viewport levels and render levels. The viewport I want to turn down to 1, and that way it's going to be less laggy in the view, but then when we render it, it's actually going to be rendered at 2 levels of subdivision, so it'll be smoother. Now you can see that because it's being smoothed out, because we have that subsurf modifier, this right here, it's kind of coming down really weird, and that's not really the shape of the Rubik's Cube, so I want to add some loop cuts to define the shapes better. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, and I want to add some loop cuts right here and here and here. So I'm going to press Ctrl R again, and then hover your mouse right over here, but before you click, I'm going to scroll my mouse wheel out, and that's going to make 2. Then I can left click and then right click so it hops it back to the center. So I'm going to do the same thing, Ctrl R, scroll my mouse out so there's 2, and then I'm going to left click and then right click. So let's do the same thing down here, so Ctrl R, scroll out, and then left click and then right click. So now if we tab back into object mode, you can see this is a lot smoother, and when it renders, it's going to be even smoother because the levels are going to be set to 2, but that is really great. And if you look at your Rubik's Cube, that looks pretty realistic. Now, if you zoom in here, you can see that there are a few other places that I want to sharpen up because right here, this right here is a little bit smooth and it's not very sharp. I want to sharpen up both of these edges so that they're a lot sharper and there's more of a crease there. So this is a little bit fiddly, but I'll show you the best way to do it. So to see this better, I'm going to click on this button right here. It looks like a computer monitor. And what that's going to do is going to hide the subdivision surface from our view, but it's still there. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab into edit mode and just zoom way in here. So see this little lip right here? I want to add a loop cut right in there so that this edge right here, this edge, that's sharper. So what I'm going to do is press Ctrl R, click and add a loop cut, and then drag it out just a little bit. I don't want it to be touching the other one, but just a little bit more towards it, and then just click again to place that. So now I can move over here and I want to do the same thing. So Ctrl R, click, drag over a little bit, and then click to place that. And now if I go back into object mode and I turn this on so that we can see the subsurf, now this edge is actually a lot more sharp. You can see that that right there is a lot sharper. So that's really great. So let's do the same thing. So if you need to be able to see it better, it's a little bit hard to see. So if you want to, you can just turn this off and then that way you can't see the subdivision surface. Ctrl R, click, drag up, and then click to place that. And then again here, Ctrl R, click, drag up, and then click to place that. So let's do the same thing down here. So I'll just navigate over here. I'm going to press Ctrl R, click, bring it up front a little bit, and then click to place that. And then just one more, Ctrl R, click, drag over, and then click to place that. So I can turn on the subdivision surface, and if you zoom out now, you can see that that edge is a lot more sharp. All right, so now I'm going to set up some basic lighting, and then we can do our materials. So let's just press Ctrl S again to save our project. Now to set up the lighting, I'm going to go right here to the world, and you can really set up whatever lighting you want. You could press Shift A and add some lights here, whatever you want to do. But what I'm going to do is add in that HDRI that I talked about at the beginning of the tutorial, and that's going to make very realistic lighting. So I'm going to click right here on this yellow thing right here, and then I'm going to click on Environment Texture, and then we can just click on Open to open that HDRI. And then here's the HDRI that I'm going to be using. Again, link is in the description if you'd like to download it. I'm just going to double tap on it to add it in. Now, if I press Z and move my mouse up to go into rendered mode, you can see that it's added in the HDRI. And now we have some very realistic lighting and we have reflections and everything around on this Rubik's Cube. So that will help to make it look much more photorealistic. I'll press Z and go back into solid view. Now there is one more thing that I want to do with the lighting to make it look even more realistic. I want to turn on Filmic Blender, and that way the lighting will be even more realistic. So I'm going to click right up here on the render properties, and I'm going to go down here to color management. If I just scroll down, the view transform, just make sure this is set to Filmic, and that's actually going to make the lighting more photorealistic. And then the look here, if you want to, you can see that everything kind of looks slightly grayed out. So if you change the look to high contrast, that's just going to pop out the colors, make everything a little bit more saturated and look a little bit nicer. All right, so that is great. So let's go over now to the material tab. And then I'm just going to click on new to add a new material. And then to preview the material, I'll press Z, move my mouse down to go into the material preview so that we can preview the materials as we create them. So this material right here, I'm going to click on it and I'm going to call it black because it's going to be the black shiny parts in between the colors on the Rubik's Cube. Now the base color right here, I'm going to turn this all the way to pure black, and now you can see it's black. And then I want to add in that fingerprint texture. So to add that in, I'm going to go right over here to the shading tab so so that we can work with Blender's nodes. So if you just pull this up and bring this over, you can see here is the principled BSDF shader, and this is the shader that it's using. So here is the black color. Now what I want to do is take the fingerprint texture and plug it into this roughness value so that it'll tell it that where the fingerprints are, that's going to be a little bit less rough, and then where there's not fingerprints, it's going to be more shiny, and that will make it more photorealistic. So to do that, I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to search for an image texture. Just drop the image texture right here, and then we can click on Open to open up the image. Alright, and then link is in the description again if you'd like to download the fingerprint texture. So once you download it, you're just going to have to extract the zip file, and then when you open up the folder, there's going to be all these different textures right here. Now we only want to use this roughness map, so I'm just going to click on this and then just double click on it to open it up. So now we have the fingerprint 02 roughness. So what I want to do is I want to plug this color here up to the roughness, and then that way it'll use that map as our roughness map. Now one really important thing that we need to do, because this isn't being plugged into the color and it's not affecting the color at all, this color space here, we need to turn this to non-color data so that it will work properly. And now you can see if I just drag this down, you can see that it looks like there's fingerprints on our Rubik's Cube, and that is really great. Now you may have noticed that like it's mirroring it on the other sides. That's because we have the Mirror Modifier on. So once we create the entire Rubik's Cube, we're going to UV unwrap the Rubik's Cube and project the fingerprint texture onto the Rubik's Cube so it's more realistic. Because right now you can see it's kind of mirroring, but we will fix that. Alright, now if you go into rendered mode and bring this over so that you can see the reflections, you can see that where there isn't any fingerprint texture, it's very, very shiny, and then where the fingerprint texture is, it's a little bit rough. What I want to do is I want to tell it how shiny I want the Rubik's Cube to be. So to do that, I'm going to just bring this out, and I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to click on the search here, and I'm going to search for a color ramp. I'm just going to click on color ramp, and I'll just drop it right in here in between the connection of the color and the roughness. So now what we can do is see this little black tab here. If we click right here on this color, we can start to turn this up, and you can see what it's doing. When we turn this value up, the shiny parts, the parts where there's no fingerprints, that's going to make it more and more rough. So you can just change that to whatever you want. So kind of right here where there's no fingerprints, if you turn this up, it'll be more and more rough. I still want it to be pretty shiny, but just not quite that shiny. So something like that is probably pretty good, just kind of a dark gray. Then this white value, if we click on this now and then click on the color, if you start to turn this down, it's going to make the fingerprints more and more shiny. So if you want to make the fingerprints very, very subtle, you can turn them down and now you can't even see the fingerprints, but if you turn it up, it's going to make them more and more rough. Really try to get this right, because what we're going to do later on is we're going to duplicate this material and then make it all the other colors, and that way it's going to have the fingerprint texture on all the different colors. And if you want to go ahead and change it later on, you're going to have to go individually to all the colors and change these values. So just get it right. That looks totally fine. So that is great. So let's go back into the layout right here. So now what I want to do is I want to add all the materials to the different sides of the cube. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, and to see this a little bit better, I think I'll press Z, move my mouse over to go back into solid view. Now again, if you click right over here on the modifiers, it's probably better if you just click on this little button to hide the subdivision surface from the view, and that way we can see the object a little bit better. So now let's click over on the materials, and I want to add in the first material, which is going to be the white, and I'm going to put the white on the very top. And you can use whatever colors you want, but I'm going to be creating a classic Rubik's Cube, so I'm going to be using these classic colors on this Rubik's Cube. So what I want to do first is I want to select all the faces that I want to have the white color on. So what I want to do is press 3 for the face select, or just click right up here. Then I'll press B for the box select, and I'm just going to drag out and select all of these faces. Now I also want the inside of the lip to be white as well. And because we added the loop cut in there, there is 2 loops of faces. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key so I can select multiple faces. And then I'm also going to hold down the Alt key so that we can select loops. Then what I'm going to do, if you zoom way in here, I'm going to, holding down the Alt and Shift key, select this, and then also select this. So now you can see, if you press G to grab, you can see that we have those faces on top as well as the faces on the side. I'll just press escape to bring that back to the center there. So what I'm going to do is click on this plus here to add a new material in this object. Then instead of clicking on new, I want to click on the black color because I still want to use the roughness map that we have. So now I've added the black, so there's 2 black materials. Now to duplicate this material and make it separate, I'm going to click on this little file icon right here, and this will duplicate the material but still keep all the settings. So I'm going to click on this, and now you can see it says black 001. I'm going to click to rename this, and I'm going to call this white. So what I want to do is this base color, I want to turn this all the way up to white. So I'm just going to click right here, and I'll just drag up and make it pure white. And then I need to actually assign the white color to our selection. So to do that, make sure that's still selected, and then click on Assign. Now if you press Z and move your mouse down to go into the material preview, you can see that wherever it was selected, we assigned it to that face, and now that is white. So now we just need to do the same thing for all the other sides. So this is slightly repetitive, but it won't take very long. We just have to get through it. So I'm going to tab back into edit mode, press A to deselect everything, and then I'm just going to press B and box select this side, and I'm looking at my real Rubik's Cube, and this is going to be blue. So now that we've selected all those faces, I'm just going to zoom in here, and you can see that I need to select the loops as well, so I'm going to hold down the Shift and Alt key, and just select this loop and this loop. Oops, wrong one. I'm just going to press Ctrl Z to do that. There we go. So we just have those selected. Now what I'm going to do is do the same thing. So I'm going to click on plus right here. Again, add the black material because I want to use the roughness texture. Then click on this file icon to duplicate the material. And this one we're going to call blue. Now I want to assign it to our selection. So just click on Assign. And now that is the blue color, but it doesn't look any different because we need to change the base color. So the base color, I'm going to turn all the way up to white. And then I'm going to turn it up to a blue color. Not too dark, but not too light. Just something like that. Maybe slightly on the darker side. And there we go. So if I tab back into object mode, you can see what we've done. So let's do the same thing. So on this side, this is going to be red. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, press A to deselect everything, B for the box select, and I'll just select these faces. And then I'll just zoom in here and hold down the Shift and Alt key and select this loop and this loop. And then I'll click on plus here to add a new material, click on the drop down, and we're going to click on the black material. And then we're going to click on this file icon to duplicate the material, and we're going to call this one red, and then make sure this is still selected, and we're going to click on Assign to assign it to those faces. And then the base color, I need to make this all the way up to red, so I'll just click over here on the RGB, and then this R here, I'm just going to turn this all the way up so it's fully red. So we've done 3 of the sides now, but when you look over here, you can see that because we're using the Mirror Modifier, it's blue on the other side, so we're going to have to apply the Mirror Modifier before we do the other colors. So let's tab back into object mode, and I'm going to go right over here to the material panel. So now I need to apply this Mirror Modifier, but before I apply it, I want to just duplicate this and keep it as a backup just in case something goes wrong and we need to go back to it. It's just a good thing to do before we apply our Mirror Modifier. So what I'm going to do is just with this selected, I'm going to press Shift D and then just press Escape, and that way it'll hop it back to its default position. Now what I want to do is I want to move it to a separate collection, and these are collections right here. I want to move it to a separate collection and then hide the collection, and that way it's just kind of sitting there in the background, but it's hidden, and then if we want to come back to it, we can, just in case. So with that other one selected, I'm going to press the M key, and then you can see this is the collection that it's currently in. I want to make a new collection. So I'm going to click on new collection, and I'm going to call this backup, and then just click on OK. Now you can see here, there's this backup collection and the cubes in it. And then there's also the regular collection. So this backup here, I don't want to see it. So I'm just going to click on this check mark here to deselect it. And now we just have this one cube. So now we can just click right over here and then click on apply, and then I'll just press Ctrl S to save the Blender file. So if you tab into edit mode now, you can see that the Mirror Modifier has been applied, and now we can add the other materials. So over here on this other side, the color is green. So what we can do actually is we can go right here to the materials, and we can just tell Blender to select the blue material. So what you do is just click on the blue, And then instead of clicking on assign, we're going to click on select, and that way it's going to select anything that's blue. So you can see it selected this and this. So I want to make this green, so what I'll just do is deselect this side, and then we can just make this side green. So I'll press Z, move my mouse over to go into wireframe, and then I'll press B for the box select, and this time, instead of just clicking and dragging to select, I want to deselect. So I'm going to click with my middle mouse wheel, and then bring this out, and then let go, and now it's deselected that side, and this side is the only one selected. So now we'll just do the same exact thing. So I'm going to click on the plus icon, we're going to click on this, and then click on the black material. We're going to duplicate it by clicking on the file icon, and then we're going to call this green. And then this is still selected, so we need to click on assign, and then we'll just turn this to a green color. So I'm going to turn this all the way up and then turn it to a bright green. And then on my Rubik's Cube, the green color is a little bit darker, so I'll just make it a little bit darker to something like that. All right, there we go. So now we have done 4 sides. So we still need to do this side. So on my Rubik's Cube, this side is orange. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, and you can see this is already red. So I'll just press A to deselect. I'm going to click on the red, and then I'm going to click on select, and now it selects all of the red faces. I'll press Z to go into wireframe, B for the box select, and I'll click with my middle mouse, drag this one, and then let go. So now this one is the only one selected. Then I'll do the same thing. So I'm going to click on the plus right here. We're going to go right here and click on the black one. And then I want to duplicate it, so I'll click on the file icon to duplicate it. And then this one, I'm going to call this orange. Then I can click on assign to assign it to those faces, and then I'll just click on this, and then I'll just make it a nice orange color and turn the brightness all the way up. All right, so we've done almost all the sides here. Let's go down to the bottom, and the bottom one, which is opposite from the white one, this one is yellow, and this is the last one we need to do. So again, one more time, let's do this again. Tab into edit mode, A to deselect everything. We're going to click on the white and then click on select, Z to go into wireframe. Move your mouse over when you press Z to go into wireframe, and then I'll press B and box select this, but I'm going to hold down with my middle mouse wheel as I do this to deselect, and then go back into the material preview. I'm going to click on the plus icon, click on the drop down, click on the black one. We're going to duplicate it with this button, and then I'm going to call this yellow. If I can spell that right, yellow. And then click on assign, and then we're going to turn this all the way up and turn it to a nice yellow color. All right, there we go. So now we have all the sides of our Rubik's Cube, and then if you want to click back over here and click on this button, that way we can see the Rubik's Cube with the subsurf on, and that looks really great. The viewport levels, I am going to turn this down to 1 so that it will be less laggy later on. All right, so that is great. So now what we need to do is we need to add an array modifier to array this out and kind of duplicate it, and then we can make 3 of them so that we have a 3x3 Rubik's Cube. So I'm going to click right over here to add modifier, and I'm going to click on the array modifier. And you can see what it does is it just arrays this object over. Now the count here, I want to change this to 3 because I want this to be a 3x3. So now what I want to do is I want to array the cubes that are already arrayed. So to do that, I'm just going to click on this thing right here and this thing right here. It's these little arrows, and that'll just minimize the modifiers. I'll click on add modifier, and we're going to add another array. Now this one, you can see it's arraying it out on the x-axis because there's this little red line here. I want to array it out this way. So the factor, I'm going to change that to 0, and then the y, I'm going to turn that to 1. And that way it's going to array it on the y-axis, which is this green line right here. Now the count, I want to turn that to 3. And that is great. So now we just need to array it one more time. So I'll just minimize this, click on add modifier. We're going to add another array. And again, the default is that it arrays it on the x-axis. So this thing right here, I'm going to turn this to 0. And then the z-axis, I'm going to turn this to 1. So it arrays it up. And then the count again, I'll turn to 3. There we go. That is really looking like a Rubik's Cube now. So now what we need to do is we need to apply these array modifiers so that we can actually animate the Rubik's Cube and rotate it around. And also we still need to UV unwrap them because you can see right here, they're all the same. The fingerprints are exactly the same. So we'll need to UV unwrap this. So we need to apply the array modifier. Now again, I want to duplicate this so that just in case if something goes wrong and we need to come back to this, we can. So I'm going to press Shift D, then click on Escape, and then I'll press M to move it to the new collection, and I'm going to click on the backup. And that way it just adds it to the backup collection, but the backup collection is hidden so we can't see it. All right, just click on the Rubik's Cube, and now I need to apply these arrays. So I'm going to click on this one, click on Apply, click on the drop down, click on Apply, and then click on the drop down and click on apply. So now when we tab into edit mode, you can see that it's all applied. That is really great. So now what we can do is we can re-UV unwrap this so that the fingerprints aren't the same on every cube. So to do that, I'm going to tab into edit mode and I'll press 1 for front view, and then I'll press Z and move my mouse over and let go to go into wireframe. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press B for the box select, and I'm just going to click and drag, and I'm going to just select this side so that just these are selected. If I zoom in here, you can see I don't want to select any of these in the center, just the ones on the side here. And then I want to do the same thing for the other side. So I'm going to press B for the box select, just click and drag and just select these ones. Actually, I want to select these ones too. There we go. So now I want to press 3 on the numpad, and that's going to go to the side view. And I just want to project the fingerprint texture right onto the side of the Rubik's Cube. So to do that, just kind of zoom in so you can see the entire Rubik's Cube. I'm going to press U, and then I'm going to click on project from view. And that way it's just going to project it right onto the cube just like that. So now without zooming out or anything, I'm going to press A to deselect. And then I'll press B, and I'm going to do the same thing for these two sides, and then we'll UV unwrap them as well. So I'm going to just box select this side, press B again, box select this side. Oh, didn't get all of it. There we go. I'm going to press 1 now, and that'll go to the front view, and then I'll press U, project from view. That's just going to project it right there. I'll press A to deselect everything, and now we just need to do the top face and the bottom face. So I'll press B for the box select, click and drag. There we go. B for the box select, click and drag, and then I'll press 7 for top view, 7 on the numpad, and I'll press U, and I'm going to project from view. All right, if we tab back into object mode now and go into the material preview and kind of just go over so that you can see the reflections, that is looking really great. So you can see that now the fingerprints are all different, they're all randomized, and it looks a lot more photorealistic. Now we need to actually change the size of the fingerprints because I think those fingerprints are actually a little bit too small, because if I look at my thumb or my finger and then I also look at the Rubik's Cube, my finger is covering up pretty much one entire square of the Rubik's Cube, but you can see there's quite a few fingerprints inside these squares, so let's go ahead and change that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here to UV editing so that we can preview our UV editing, and you can see here's our fingerprint texture, and then if we double tap A, here is our UV layout. Now we can scale this, but before we scale it, I want to click right over here on the modifier properties. Just click on this to open it, and I actually want to turn this off so that we can't see it, because if we try to scale it right now, you can see that it's like really laggy. I wouldn't suggest scaling it before you turn this off, so just click on this to turn it off. And now you can press S to scale it, and you can see that's a lot better. So if we go into the material preview, just kind of go over to the side. You can tab back into object mode if you need to. I want to scale this down so that one of these squares is about the size of one fingerprint. So I'm going to scale it down. You could even press G to grab and kind of move it over. And don't worry if it goes out of the texture, because this texture is tileable. So where this texture ends, it'll come back over here. So just move this around, and I want to get it about the size of one finger on one of those squares right there. So just scale this to whatever you think is good. You can change it to whatever looks good to you. Let's click on this button now so that we can preview that again. And we'll go back into rendered mode and just kind of look where it's really reflective. It might be better if you just go into the material preview, but you can see that now that is the correct size, and I think that's pretty good. All right, let's go back into the layout now, and then again, I'll press Ctrl S to save our project. All right, and now we can set this up so that you can pose it if you want to, and then also you can do animation with this if you want to. So to set this up for animation, I'm gonna press N, and I'm gonna open up this panel right here, and I'm gonna go to Item. So what we need to do over here on the transform is we need to change this rotation mode. Now, if you leave this at the default, you're gonna have this problem right here. It's really weird. So what you need to do is change this rotation mode to Quaternion. So I believe that's how you pronounce it, Quaternion WXYZ. So just change it to Quaternion, and that way we won't have any issues, and when you animate it, it's gonna look like this. So that is a lot better. That's what you want it to look like. All right, so that is really important. Make sure you do that, and now I'll press N to close that. All right, so before we actually get started with the animation, you can see that if I tab into edit mode, this is still one object, and we need these to be separate objects. So in edit mode, I'm gonna press A to select everything, and then I'll press P, and I'm going to separate this by loose parts. And that way, where the vertices are disconnected, it'll make that a separate object. So that way, if I click on loose parts, tab back into object mode, I can select these and you can see that every cube is its own object, and that is what we want. Now, one more thing before we start animating this, the origin point, we need the origin point to be in the very center of the Rubik's Cube. The origin point is that little orange dot right there. We want the origin point of all these objects to be in the very center of the Rubik's Cube. So to do that, I'm going to click on this, and then I'll press H to hide it. It's still there, but it's just hidden from our view. And then I'll click on this center one right here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to tab into edit mode and double tap A to make sure everything is selected. And then I'm going to press Shift S. Now we want to click on this one here, which is cursor to selected. So what that's going to do is it's going to take this 3D cursor and it's going to center it to the center of what we have selected. So again, just make sure everything's selected, cursor to selected, and now that cursor there is in the center. So I'll tab back into object mode, and then I'll press Alt H to unhide that cube. Now I'm going to double tap A to make sure everything is selected, and we want the origin point to be in the very center. So what we can do is we can click on Object, Set Origin, and I'm going to click on Origin to 3D Cursor. So now you can see if you select these and rotate them or whatever you do, the origin point is in the very center of the Rubik's Cube, and all of these separate cubes are in the very center. So that is exactly what we want. Now, an easy way to start posing this is if you click on this button right here, what that's going to do is going to toggle the X-ray. And now when I press B for the box select, it's going to select all of the objects that are going through it. So if I turn this off and press B for the box select, you can see it's only going to select the front ones, the ones that are in the very front of my selection. And that way we can just press B for the box select and select this side, and it's going to select all the ones going through it. So now we can just start to pose this. So we can press R to rotate, and we need to press X on the X-axis, and then you can type in 9, 0, and enter to rotate that over. So there we go. You can just start to pose it now. Now I actually want to animate it. If you just want to pose it, you could just press B for the box select. And then what you could also do is you could rotate this and just rotate it manually. And that way there's just going to be a little bit of randomness, and it'll look like somebody has been playing with the Rubik's Cube, because a Rubik's Cube isn't perfectly straight. If you look at it, usually someone's been playing with it and it's just like slightly tilted. So you could just do that. And then again, B for the box select, and then go to the side view, and then rotate this over, and then just kind of do the same thing. So you could select multiple ones here, rotate that over, and you can see what I'm doing. Because I'm not rotating it quite all the way over, you can see it's just giving it a little bit of randomness, and that just makes it look even more photorealistic. Now, I'm just going to Control Z that because I don't want to do this. I want to animate the Rubik's Cube. Just one really quick thing that I forgot to add into the video. If you've rotated your cube and you want to bring it back to the default, what you can do is you can press A and just make sure that the entire cube is selected, and then you can press Alt R. And what that's going to do is it's going to clear the rotation values. So before, you can see we've rotated this cube. If you press Alt R, that'll clear the rotation values, and now the cube is back to its default setup. Now you may have noticed something here. If I just select this side, and if I just start to rotate this on the X-axis and then just click, you can see that right here, you can actually see the color. Now this isn't actually realistic, because on a real Rubik's Cube, if I look at this, it's actually just flat. There's no color there. So I'm going to show you an easy way to make those insides flat. So this will just give even more realism. If you don't want to do this, totally optional. But if you want even more realism, you can do this. So it's actually pretty easy to do. I'm going to select everything, and then I'll tab into edit mode, and that's going to go into the multi-object editing. And then this thing is turned on. I need to turn this off so we're out of X-ray mode. So what I want to do is all of the colors, except the black one, but all the other colors that are inside the cube, I want to turn those to black. So what I can do is I can press L with my mouse hovered over one of the colors, and you can see it's going to select all the linked vertices. We don't want it to do that. So what I'm going to do is click right here, and instead of selecting everything that's selected to those vertices, I'm going to click on material. And what that's going to do is it's going to select only the materials that are connected to where we pressed L. So if you hover your mouse over the green, press L, you can see because that's set to material, it's only going to select the green. So just press L and then move over, L, L, L. I'm just continuing to tap L and moving my mouse. I'm just going to go along all the faces, so it shouldn't take too long to do. Pretty easy, just pressing L. We're just going to select all these. All right, we're almost done here. Just selecting all those, and then the last one here, the red one. All right, so now we've selected all of the outer faces with the colors. So everything else on the cube, everything else I want to be the black color. So to make this all black, I'm going to press Control I, and that's going to invert the selection. So now everything else is selected. So now if we go to the materials, just scroll up here, click on the black, and then click on Assign. We'll tab back into object mode now, and now if you just box select some of these, and then we'll go back out here, and then I'll go to the material preview and start to rotate this. So R and X and rotate it over. Now if you look right here, you can see that that's all black. So that is even more realistic. All right, so we now have a very photorealistic Rubik's Cube. Let's go ahead and animate it. So I'm just going to bring the timeline up. So what I'm going to do is press Z for the wireframe, just press B to box select this side, and then I'll go back into the material preview. So what I need to do is I need to start by adding in a keyframe for all these objects. So I'm going to press I, and I'm going to insert rotation. Now we don't have to manually add keyframes every single time. So what I'm going to do is click right here, and that's going to turn on the auto key, and that way when we rotate something, it's automatically going to add a keyframe. So now I can go over to maybe frame 20, go to wherever you want, and I'm going to press R to rotate, X on the X-axis, and I'm going to type in 9, 0, and enter, so it's rotated over by 90 degrees. And you can see that it's automatically added a keyframe. That little diamond thing right there, that is a keyframe. So now what I need to do is just move a couple frames over, because you can kind of have issues if it starts to move over on the same exact keyframe. So I just like to move over like 2 keyframes over, and then I can rotate this side. So I'm going to press Z for the wireframe, B for box select, just select this side. So now what I need to do before I rotate this is I need to insert keyframes onto these because they don't all have keyframes. So I'm going to press I, insert rotation, and then I can go to maybe frame 45. Let's go to frame 50 actually. And then I'm going to press R to rotate, Y on the Y-axis, because this one is on the Y-axis. And then you could type in 90. You could also type in -90. So -90, that way it's going to rotate backwards. Also, you could type in like 180 if you want it to rotate all the way down. So that's what I'm going to do. Just press enter, and now you can see, check it out. So if you just play through this, you can see that now the Rubik's Cube is rotating, and that looks really great. All right, so let's just animate this a little bit more, and then I'm also going to show you how to reverse it. So if you want the Rubik's Cube to be unsolved and you want it to solve itself, I'll show you how to do that. It's really easy to do. So let's do the same thing. So this time I'm going to rotate the top one. So let me just select everything so I can see the keyframes. I'm just going to move 2 keyframes over, so to frame 52. I'll deselect everything, and then if you want to, you could also turn on the X-ray, and then I'll just box select the top ones. All right, that is what we want. So then I'm going to press I, insert rotation, and then I'll move to maybe frame 70, and I'll press R to rotate, C on the Z axis, because this one is up and down, and I'm going to type in -90 and enter. And now we can just play through that. Really great. There we go. Super cool. And then I think I'll do that one more time. So I'm just going to, I think I'll just select these 2, just like that. We can rotate both of these over if we want to. And then again, I'll just go like 2 frames over, press I and insert rotation. And then we can just go to frame 90. And I'll just press R to rotate, X on the X-axis, actually Y on the Y-axis. And then I'll type in 90, maybe -90, and then enter. All right, let's just check this out. There we go. Very, very cool. Looking really nice. All right, so if you want to reverse this so that it actually solves itself, what you're going to need to do is press A to select everything. And I'm actually going to click on this to turn this off because we're done animating now. So I'm just going to turn this off. So to reverse this, it's really easy to do. Just make sure all of the objects are selected, and then double tap A in the timeline to make sure all of the diamonds are selected. So all those keyframes, double tap A and just make sure they're yellow. Now what I want to do is I want to flip them or reverse them. So I'm going to press S to scale the keyframes, and then I'm going to type in -1 enter. And it's really important that you type in -1 enter, so it reverses the keyframes, so now they are the exact opposite. Now to move these back to the front, just make sure they're still all selected, and I can press G to grab, and we're just going to move this to the starting. So now if you play this, you can see that the cube is unsolved, and it now solves itself. All right, so now we're just going to render this out to a final image, and I'll do a little bit of compositing, and then I'll also show you how to render this out to a finished animation. So we need to add a camera, so I'll press Shift A, and I'm just going to go down here to camera, and then I'm just going to move to wherever I want the camera to be, and I'll press Control Alt Numpad 0, and that way the camera is going to be exactly where we are. Now I can press G to move the camera around, and then I can also press G and double tap Z if I want to move the camera in and out. Alright, let's just go into render mode to see how this is looking. In the camera view, I'm going to press B and box select the camera so that it only renders what's in the camera. Now the background, I actually want that to be transparent, and then in the compositor we can just add a color. You can do that if you want, or you could also add a ground or put it in a scene or whatever you want to do. But to make it transparent, I'm going to click right here on the little like file icon. Actually, it's right up here on the render properties, and then right down here on film, I'm going to click on transparent, and that way the background will be transparent. And then I think I want to see a little bit more reflection, so I'm going to actually add the camera right over here, just so that we can see a little bit more reflection. Alright, now I'm also going to turn on motion blur right here, turn on motion blur, and that way when it's animating and it's kind of rotating, there will be just a little bit of blur and it will make it look even more realistic. And then one more thing to make it even more realistic, you can add a depth of field. So to add a depth of field, I first need to add an object that the camera can focus on. So I'm going to press Shift A, and I'm going to add an empty, and I'm just going to add a plane axis. If you press G to grab, move this down, these are just objects that are invisible to the camera, so the camera actually won't see them in the render. And I'm just going to place this empty kind of at the front of the Rubik's Cube. Now what I can do is I can select the camera and then go down here to the camera settings, and I'm going to turn on depth of field. And then I'm going to click on the little dropper right here to select an object, and I'm going to click on the empty object. And then I'll go into the camera view, and we'll just go into wireframe. Now, if this f-stop here, if you turn this down, you can see that the edges here are going to start to blur a little bit. And what that'll do is it'll make the Rubik's Cube look like it's kind of small, so there's a strong depth of field. So just change this to whatever you want. The bigger the number is, the less blurry it's going to be. I think I'll just change this to a 0.3 because I want this to be a little bit blurry. And then one more preference that I have that you could do if you want to, the focal length here, I actually think this looks a little bit better if it's a little bit higher up, so maybe just turn this up to like 70, and that way things will just be a little more flat, but I just think it makes it look a little bit nicer. Totally optional, you don't have to do that if you don't want to, but I just think that turning the focal length up a little bit makes it look a little bit nicer. Alright, so let's just play through our animation, make sure it looks all good. If you want to animate the camera, you could do that. But that is pretty good. So let's go over to the render properties. I'm just going to render this out by 1920 by 1080, so that's great. Now over here on the other render properties, the render right here, it's rendering with 100 samples. That's totally fine. I'll just render it with 100 samples. And then if you want to make your scene render a little bit faster, if you click over here on the light paths, if you turn these down, Blender's going to be able to render a little bit faster. Now I don't want to turn them all down because it'll be less realistic, because it won't be able to calculate as many of like the reflections and things. But the total I'll turn to 2, the diffuse I'll turn to 2, the glossy I'll also turn to 2, and then the transparency, we don't have any transparency, so I'm going to turn that to 0. Transmission I can turn to 0, indirect light I can turn that to 0, and then also the filter gloss can turn to 0, and then also the caustics, the reflective and refractive caustics, I can turn that off. And turning all those things off will make Blender render faster because it doesn't have to calculate as many of the light paths. Alright, let's just go File and Save again, and I'm first just going to render out a final image, so I'll just press F12 to render this out. Alright, and it finished, so now let's do a little bit of compositing, and then I'll show you how to do the animation. So I'm going to click right over here on the Compositing tab. I'm going to click on Use Nodes. Now I have the Node Wrangler add-on turned on, so what I can do is I can press Ctrl and Shift and click to add a viewer node, and that way we can see the image in the background. You can also just press Shift A and search for a viewer node and then add that in. So you can see that there's a little bit of noise right here, and I want to smooth that out. So what I'm going to do is press Shift A, and I'm going to search for the Denoise node and just drop that right here. And then I'll just plug this image right up to the viewer, and that way it's just going to add a denoise and just smooth that out, and you can see that looks a lot better. Now if you want to make a background, I'm just going to press Shift A, and I'm going to search for an alpha over node, and I will drop the alpha over node right here. And then this image, we need to wire this up to the bottom one, and then the top one, that's going to be what's in the background. So just make whatever background color you want. I think I'll just make like a blue color, something like that. That is fine for what I'm doing. Alright, so there is our Rubik's Cube render. You could also render it out from different views. So like if you want to render it out when it's solved, you could kind of bring it over here and then render it again. And you can see on the timeline, because we moved it over, it's rendering out the solved cube. Alright, so that is great. Now to save this image, you can press F11, and then here is our final image. You may need to click up here and click on the viewer node to preview the final image, and then you can click on image and then click on save as, and then just save this image to your computer. So now I'm going to show you how to render out the animation. So I'm going to go back to layout here, and I'll just press escape so that we can see the render. So if I just scrub through this, you can see the animation ends like over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to end the animation at frame 110. So you can see there is this end frame right here. Right now it's set to 250. If I just change this to 110, now you can see that it kind of gets grayed out, and there's only frames 1 to 110. So these are all the frames that we're going to need. So now what we need to do is we need to render this out as an image sequence and then export it together as a video file in Blender's video editor. So to do this, I'm going to click right over here on the file icon, and you can see that right here there is an output, and we need to set an output for our images. So I'm going to click on this file icon right here, and then in the tutorial folder, I'm going to click on this to make a new folder, and I'm going to call it rendered images, and I'll just go inside this rendered image folder and then click on accept. So now when I render out all these images, they're going to be rendered out as PNG images into that folder. Also, if you wanted to, you could change this to like a JPEG. I'm just going to use PNGs. So now just go file and save again, and then you're going to press Control F12 or click on render and then click on render animation, and then it's going to render out all the frames. And hopefully this won't take your computer too long. Now, if this is taking your computer a little long to render, there's a few things you can do. One thing that you can do is you can render this in the Eevee render engine. Now that won't be quite as realistic, but it will be a lot faster because Eevee is a real-time render engine, whereas Cycles is a ray-traced render engine. Cycles is more realistic, but Eevee would be a lot faster. Another thing you could do is you could turn down the resolution, and that way the image size is going to be smaller. And then also a really big thing is this sampling right here. If it's taking too long to render, you could definitely turn down the render samples. Just turn this down to maybe like a 50 or something, or just play around with it and get it to how you like. If you turn down the render samples, the image won't look quite as nice, but it will render faster. So if you need to play around with those settings, that will help to speed up render times. I am almost done though. This is almost done. We're on the last frame. All right, and we have finished. So I'm going to go file and save this again. And now I'm going to go file, and I'm just going to click on new, and I'm just going to click on general because I just want to open up a new Blender file. All right, so we are in a new scene in Blender now. Now what I'm going to do is scroll over here and click on the video editing tab. Now if you don't see this tab, you can click on plus and then go to video editing and then click on video editing. So what we need to do is we just need to add the images together as an image sequence, and then we can export that to a video. So here's Blender's video editor. I'm just going to press Shift A, and I'm going to go down here to image sequence and then click on this, and then just locate to where your computer saved all the images. Here are all of the images. I'm just going to press A to select all the images and then click on add image strip. Now if we play this, we can actually see the image, and that looks really cool. So you can see like the reflections there and the fingerprints. That is quite realistic, and also because we turned on motion blur, that looks very realistic. So that is really great. So let's just export this to a final video. Now the end frame, we set this to 110. So on the end frame right here, we need to set this to 110 so that it ends at the correct time. And then we just need to do some render settings. So the resolution was 1920 by 1080. So we need to make sure this is the same. So if you rendered it with a different resolution, just change this to the correct resolution. And then right down here, the output, I'm just going to save this onto my desktop. You could click right here to save it to somewhere on your computer. And then the file format, I don't want this to be PNG because that is an image. I want to change this to FFmpeg video. Now there's a few different settings that I like to do within the FFmpeg video. So the encoding right here, the container, I like to use MPEG 4. And then the video right here, I like to use H.264 and then just medium quality and good. That's totally fine. Now, if you want to add in audio, you can. When I use audio, I like to use AAC, but because I'm not using any audio, I can just turn this to no audio. But if you have like some music and sound effects or something, I would just use the AAC. And then if you want to save this video editing file, you can totally do that and then go render and then click on render animation. And this should be pretty quick because it's just exporting all the frames together. All right, so that's the tutorial. That is the finished Rubik's Cube, and also here's the animation that created. Thank you for watching the tutorial. I hope that it was easy to follow along, and I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm trying to make Blender tutorials for a living, so if you'd like to support what I do, as well as get the project files for my tutorials, then the best place to do that is over on my Gumroad store or my Patreon page. the links are in the description. But again, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in a future tutorial.